Welcome to the Manumission podcast, the show dedicated to unshackling ourselves from the status quo. Here's your host, H.H. Morris.
I know. My first episode, I'm already late. Sorry, guys. Had some technical issues I had to work through. And so now I'm recording this overnight, staying up late just to do this for you. So, who loves you? So you should have this hopefully early Monday morning for you guys to listen to. And for today's freedom check, which is what I'm going to call the first half of the show, I want to address something by way of a question. Who represents you? Or are you represented? And so, with the recent election of Donald Trump and the subsequent aftermath, I think we're at a perfect place to reanalyze the current political system. The reason that I say that is that with such a contested election and with such divisive candidates, I can't remember a time when there were more people who are disaffected and who have become skeptical of government in general. And I'm not naive enough to believe that if Hillary Clinton had won instead of Trump, that Trump supporters would not be throwing similar temper tantrums as the left and the neocons are doing right now. So instead of trying to figure out what went wrong where, I believe it's more useful to examine whether the system makes sense even in its ideal form. But in order to do this, I think it's important to understand a few things. First off, most people in the West revere what they consider their current system of government, democracy, and regard it as the best of all political systems. The main reason being because they claim that it's the only system that represents the will of the people as opposed to the will of the elites. But right here we already run into a problem. Most of the modern nation states are not even democracies, but constitutional republics, parliamentary republics, or some other form of representative republic, not direct democracies per se. And there are very distinct differences between these two systems. For starters, most of the founders of these modern states understood that democracy is merely mob rule and the tyranny of the majority over the minority. The founders of the U.S. actually understood this better than anyone, and one need only read their writings to learn just how much they derided democracy. That's the reason they created a constitution that was supposed to limit the power of the government and broke it up into 3 separate branches that had to share power. Actually, the only part of the new federal government that was democratic was the election of congressmen in the House of Representatives. So remember that originally, senators were selected by the state legislatures. In addition, the presidential elections were not and still are not direct elections. It's the Electoral College that ultimately elects the president. All of this was done with the intention of keeping the masses from electing demagogues or strongmen to the presidency and to ensure that the other branches of government were run by people who are, quote, qualified to govern, whatever that means. So at this point, you're probably thinking, well, doesn't that kind of system lead to the establishment of a ruling class just like the ones that the founders fought against? The short answer is yes. The more nuanced answer is that the new system at least provided some basic and expanded protections to citizens through things like the Bill of Rights and the limited scope of the government, the new government, to just a few enumerated powers. But that didn't last very long. In reality, the titles of nobility that the founders railed against and prohibited, even in the new constitution, would effectively be reborn, albeit with new names. Earls, dukes, lords, and the like were replaced by senators, representatives, judges, etc. The reason why most people in the West refer to their countries as democracies and extol the virtues of democracy at every turn, it's not an accident. And I think this is something that started in the progressive era, at least in the U.S., and it continues to this day. I'll have more to say about that in future shows. But there's a few reasons for this phenomenon, I think. Remember what I mentioned previously about the controls and limitations that republics have in place. Those who seek to power and control will not let those barriers get in the way. The most effective way is to convince the population that as long as the majority of the people want X, it should be given to them. Now, of course, when the people ask for Y, then the opponents are quick to point out that the government does not have the power to implement that policy. See how it works? But there's a more insidious reason to why politicians, ideologues, and state functionaries keep banging this democracy drum. You see, it perpetuates the belief that the people are in control. You see, talking about constitutional amendments or article this, section that is clunky and messy when all you really want to do is just convince the majority about X or Y. But even those who clamor for democracy these days are aware that a pure direct democracy is not optimal or even feasible. There are just too many people to vote for every single government functionary and every single policy or law to make the system workable. Instead, they would rather just have you vote for them and give them the power so that they will just take it from there. So the question that I'm posing today is, in any of these systems, republics or democracies, can you say that you are being represented? And I'm not saying in this current system or in your current country. I'm asking, even in their perfect forms, whether they've ever existed or not, can we say that it is even possible for us to be represented by government? In order to unpack this question and its implications, we need to ask a few other questions. In the case of a republic, can it be said that a handful of people 100, 200, 300 years ago or more spoke for you today when they came up with a constitution? A clear way of putting it would be, what if your great-great-great-great-great-grandparents had signed a document committing you to do X 100 plus years later? For the lawyers in the audience, would this be something that would hold up in court, do you think? But let's now look at democracy, or the democratic aspects of a republic, because those raise several questions as well. Does voting for candidates or policies mean that you're in control, or that the results reflect the will of the people? Imagine the following scenario. I come up to you with a gun and say, "Give me your money." I think any fair-minded person would recognize this as a holdup and that what I'm doing is immoral, right? Now, let's say that we're in a group of 3 people and me and the other person vote that you should give us your money, and if you don't, I can shoot you. Does this change anything? Now, add as many people as you want to, say, 130 million people, and 50.1% of us vote to have the other 49.9% of you to give us your money, or we'll put you in jail or shoot you or whatever. At what point did the exact same action become morally acceptable? Are you beginning to see the problem yet? It is through this mechanism of voting that the ruling class has convinced us, not only that we're in control, but that through this system we can change what would be moral acts at the individual level into moral ones. Here we see the first major crack in the idea that the government represents the will of the people, since it cannot even legitimize immoral acts, since the citizens don't have the power to give in the first place. But for a moment, let's forget about the fact that we often, actually most of the time, vote for policies or politicians who will enact those policies that infringe on others' freedoms, like taxes, regulations, persecuting a particular group, wars, etc. What if we voted on something completely benign, like, I don't know, whether to cut down a tree in some unknown piece of land or something? And once again, we got a result of 50.1% to 49.9%. Can we say that the will of the people was carried out? I think not. But what's worse is that in real life, the situation is even more egregious. Let me use a recent election as an example. Forget about the Electoral College for a minute. I'm going to talk about that at a later time. About 130 million people voted for the President of the United States, and the final results are about 50-50. Let's say 50-50 for the sake of argument here. That's in a country of 315 million people, which means that 185 million people had no say. And defenders of this type of government respond to this conundrum by pointing out that if only more people were responsible enough to vote, then that would not be an issue. But let's take a look at what that would actually look like. Even if every single eligible voter had voted, it would still be about half of the country imposing their will on the other. Does that make it any better? Let's take this issue to its extremes and see what we can glean from them, okay? Let's say that all 315 million citizens voted in every election. Okay, so let's just assume for the sake of argument that children, even newborns and people in comas could vote somehow. I don't know. How much would your vote be worth in that situation? I mean, the more people that vote, the less weight your actual vote carries, right? So what would be the incentive to study the candidates, the policies, their stances, or anything else? Zero. Is an election more legitimate if more people vote, even if it's more likely that the voters are ill-educated about the candidates and policies? Some people argue that the answer is for more candidates and more political parties, but by the numbers, that would only mean that whoever wins would be put in power with less than half of the vote, since they merely need a plurality, right? I mean, does someone who win an election with 30% of the vote represent the entire country or district? Now, on the other extreme, let's say that only 3 people are designated to vote so that there couldn't be a tie. So assuming that there's 2 candidates from just 2 parties. If you were one of those people, you would surely take it very seriously, right? And you'd study every aspect of the election, the candidates, their policies, backgrounds, everything, since you know that your vote actually has a direct impact on the outcome of the election. The problem with this example is pretty clear. The decisions are being made by an even smaller minority. So in either extreme or anywhere in between, do we have a satisfactory, much less just way of gaining authority over other people? But we're not done yet. Let's look further into this representation conundrum. Think of a time when you or someone else you know hired an attorney, a realtor, or any other type of agent for whatever purpose. They were hired voluntarily. Both parties reviewed and agreed to the terms of that representation, including the limits and scope of that representation, the compensation for their services, and so on. Moreover, if at any time they failed to meet your needs or expectations, they could be fired immediately, and another agent's services could be sought, right? Well, we have no such options with government. Your government representative might be someone you didn't vote for, because you voted for the guy that lost, right? Or someone with whom you disagree with on policy, their character, or anything else. In addition, you have no say on their pay, and if they don't do a good job, they still stay in office until the end of their term. All of this applies, even if you did, in fact, vote for the person. I mean, it's not a stretch to say that many, if not most, politicians end up disappointing even the very same people that supported them initially. So, barring them committing some kind of serious crime, they stay on board and can create as much damage as they want with no incentive to do otherwise, because there are rarely any consequences, at least not immediate ones. Okay, pop quiz for all of you. Who is your representative in your federal government right now? Give you a second to think. Well, I'm pretty sure most of you couldn't come up with a name. Doesn't matter where you live. I don't care if you're in the United States or anywhere else in the world. I'm sure you probably couldn't come up with a name. And for the few of you that do know who your representative is, before you get all full of yourself, let me ask you this. If I were to ask that representative if they know who you are, what would be the answer? So, what do you think? Are you being represented? Well, as a manager of people and projects for many years in the corporate world, as well as an entrepreneur, I always tell my employees that criticizing or breaking something down is easy. Anyone can do it. It's providing alternatives and possible solutions that makes one a valuable asset. So let me end this entry by providing you with at least some examples or alternatives to the systems I covered. In fact, these alternatives you live every day. You might not like how a particular company does business, or you just might not like their products. Are you forced to patronize that business? No. When you don't, are you carted off to jail? Again, no. As a lapsed Catholic, when I stopped going to Mass and stopped giving money to my church, was I raided by a SWAT team in the middle of the night? No. Do you require a commissar of health or or something like that to make you brush your teeth every night or to tell you what to eat every morning. No. The fact is that we spend most of our lives voluntarily choosing what is best for us without causing any harm to anyone, even if we might sometimes cause harm to ourselves. And yet, we have been led to believe that if it weren't for a tiny amount of people who rule over us, our lives would be a disaster. I'm not so sure. After all, it's only through government that I'm forced to support businesses I don't like, people I don't like, policies I don't like, all while I have zero desire to force others to support the things that I do like. The trick lies in getting everyone else to reciprocate that. How do we do that? Well, that's precisely what the Manumission is about. Stay tuned for more. All right, guys, I hope you like our first freedom check. So for the remainder of the show, I want to talk about the elephant in the room. Of course, that being the presidential election. Ooh, it's been I know. It's been over a month now, but I think it's important for me to just give you some of my thoughts just so we can get it over with and keep moving forward. And then in subsequent episodes, we can start with, more current events. But it's important to talk about maybe a little bit of the campaign and then the election itself and some of the aftermath, because, especially for me, because it was a big impetus in me coming back behind the mic and wanting to share some of my thoughts and try to make a difference, if, albeit a small one if possible. But one of the things that I realized throughout the campaign season, and not having a show throughout it and having to keep everything bottled in and not even, not being able to express my ideas and my feelings about all the craziness that I was seeing. It was tough. And one thing that I will tell everyone, and I know some of you guys that are coming from my previous podcast, you've heard this, and I've probably mentioned this several times, but for all you new listeners, I'm going to make a recommendation, and I think if for any of you guys who heed my recommendation, my advice, I guarantee you will thank me. Okay? And here's something that's going to change your life, and that's going to save your sanity if you do it. Okay? Cut the cord. Okay? I don't know if everybody knows what that means, but what it means is cut the cord to your cable television. In other words, get rid of your television. That's just an expression. I don't know if people in other countries or even in other English-speaking countries refer to that as cutting the cord. But I cut the cord a little over 5 years ago now. And I can tell you that's one of the best things that I ever did for my sanity and just my own well-being in general. And the reason why I say that is because I've actually worked from home for a very long time, and I would sit in front of my computer. I'd be working 12, 14, 16-hour days, but I usually always had the television on in the background, and I had the news on. So I had the cable news, 24-hour news, and whether it's Fox News or CNN, whatever it is, it was always just in the background. I was always absorbing all this stuff. And one day I realized that, we were paying all this money for cable television. Some case it'd be over $150 a month when I was only really watching a couple channels, whether it just be news channels and, history channels, since I'm a history buff, and, maybe another channel. That's it, out of the 800 or however many channels they had back then. So my wife and I decided to get rid of it. Again, it's now been almost 5 years, and I can tell you that it's been amazing. Not only has it opened me to look at a lot of new things, a lot of different ideas, more time to just study things and research things and actually hunt things down, as opposed to just be a sponge for all of this negativity, yellow journalism, and just flat out lies. Okay? So now, as a matter of fact, when I travel, and I do actually travel quite a bit for work, and I stay at hotels, that's really the only time that I'm ever, in front of a television now. And I'll turn them on and I'll put on the news or something like that. And I can't watch for more than 5 minutes. I mean, I just want to jump out of my skin. Because now when you get disconnected from that, you can see right through them. Okay? You see right through the lies, right through the propaganda immediately. And you just can't believe what's going on. It's almost like you're in a different universe. So that's the downside. You'll be ruined from television forever, but I guarantee you that it will absolutely change your life for the better if you do something like that. Now, with that comes a lot of responsibility. It doesn't mean disconnecting from the world and from what's going on out there. A lot of people think that that's what I mean when I tell them to disconnect. And a lot of people have actually done that. I do know a lot of people that literally know nothing about what's going out in the world. And that's also not so good because there are a lot of things that are going on that we need to be aware of, that we need to stay on top of, and that's also not good. It's basically the mirror image of that same problem, right? So what I do is I make sure that I research as much as I can on my own, and then the things that I do find, even if they do come from mainstream media, I mean, I still read a lot of things that get posted on Fox or CNN or MSNBC or Huffington Post or, Drudge. I look a lot at the aggregators, but at least I'm coming to it and I'm looking at it, and I choose, at what level and at what frequency and to what depth I consume some of this stuff. And in so doing, I've actually come to find a lot of sources of information and of news that I find actually credible. So whether it's individual, pages on the internet, or it's even individual journalists that I trust and that I've vetted myself and that I follow, and I say, hey, I know I can trust this guy's or this gal's writing or information. So that's just a quick tidbit on that. But even so, in doing that, obviously I was on top of the campaign, the presidential campaign, and I'll just give you some of my quick observations. The main one being that this campaign upended almost everything in terms of parties, party affiliations, ideologies. It was amazing to me to see that the leftists, the so-called liberals in the United States, went from detesting a terrible, terrible neocon like George W. Bush and everything that he stood for, and Dick Cheney, to essentially supporting the equivalent of George Bush and Dick Cheney in Hillary Clinton. She is an absolute neocon, and everything that the left said they hated in Bush is in neocon Hillary, times 10, and that's who their candidate was. So that struck me as I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that. Obviously, we saw with everything that happened with WikiLeaks what the Democratic National Committee did to essentially steal the nomination in many ways and give it to Hillary. But the fact that basically everyone jumped on board the Hillary train on the left was just absolutely something that I couldn't even fathom. I mean, to me, any respectable leftist would have just voted for Jill Stein. But that highlights another problem, which is just how divisive the other guy was, the other candidate, and that's Trump. And again, an upending of the Republican Party. I mean, the fact that someone that's not conservative at all, right? I mean, he had no conservative credentials at all. I mean, he'd been a Democrat his whole life, pretty much, and even supported the Clintons in a lot of ways, and a lot of Democrats. And the fact that the Republican Party, well, not the establishment at least, and we know that there were a lot of never-Trumpers, but I mean, it's upside down now. I mean, you can make a very good case that the more leftist candidate was Trump, and that the more conservative candidate was Hillary in a lot of ways. But I think the way that you can kind of make sense of this is when you see just how sick and tired just regular people in the United States were from the lies from the last 8 years from the Obama administration and the lies that we've been fed about the recovery from 2008, which has really not happened, and the fact that so many people, millions of people, have not really gotten the level of jobs that they had back before the Great Recession in 2008, and that these phony numbers of jobs that they tell us we're at 5% unemployment, all this stuff, and that people don't realize that these are phony numbers, and they only are that low because the overall amount of jobs never went back to what it was before. So we know that we can make a number bigger, right, or decrease a percentage by either decreasing the denominator or increasing the numerator, right? So if you had 100 jobs when in 2008, and then that went down to 70, right? Once the numerator starts going up, the percentage gets smaller faster, right? Or I don't know. I'm not good at math. I think I might have gotten it backwards. But you know what I'm saying. Essentially, we never got the same amount of jobs back, or even the same quality of jobs. And then the way that the government calculates the employment rate is also weird, because someone might have 2 jobs or 3 jobs now, and so that counts as 2 jobs in terms of the way that the government calculates it. And so you're like, oh yeah, well look, we're on our way back up. But meanwhile, it's someone that might have been an accountant before and is now bartending and waiting tables, and maybe even doing another 3rd job, right? And that shows up as either 2 or 3 jobs. So that's just overall, that's normal people just fed up. And then on top of that, the cultural issues where, academia, the political correctness, the safe spaces, the constantly bashing on anybody that's not a protected class. So whether you're a male, you're white, you're Christian, you're just everything that's been going down in the way that the left and the media and Hollywood, just in the left in general, just beating people over the head with this kind of stuff. I mean, it was just incredible to me to watch. And that's why from the beginning, I wasn't surprised. I mean, even though I realized from the very beginning that Trump was not a conservative. I've never liked the guy even before he was ever even in the radar for running for president. I've always thought that he was kind of a jerk and a narcissist and just a douchebag. But I was, from the very beginning that he started running, I would talk to people and be like, oh, yeah, this guy's a joke. It's never going to happen, blah, blah, blah. And I was always like, I don't know about that. I mean, people are pissed, guys. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he won. I would actually expect him to win, not just a primary, but the actual election. And people were like, oh, you're absolutely insane. So again, I was not surprised at all, just like I was not surprised with Brexit. Brexit was a very, very similar situation because, again, people were just absolutely sick and tired with politics, with the establishment, with just business as usual in the UK. And again, the people that are most out of touch are the ones that were the most blindsided by this. And again, what's ironic is I don't even watch these news, right? These channels and all that stuff. And I wasn't surprised by any of it. So that's why I wanted to bring that up and suggest the cutting the cord situation. And in one of the episodes, I will share with you some of my sources for news and information. And hopefully that will help you guys kind of see where I come in. They're not perfect, okay? I'll tell you that much. There aren't any that are just 100% and that they get everything right on everything. But at the very least, what I look for are, the people that are actually genuine and they're actually trying to do good journalism. And that says a lot, to me at least, in the way that someone approaches their job as a journalist. And even if I don't end up agreeing with what they say, or I think that there might be something wrong with the way they might be analyzing something, or the way that they document something, but again, I don't see that at all with the mainstream media. So that was another thing about the Trump phenomenon, which is he brought down, if there's anything good that comes out of a Trump presidency, is just the takedown of the mainstream media. Okay, if anything, if his election is going to be worth anything, okay, no matter what he ends up doing from here on out, the fact that essentially the mainstream media has lost all credibility in the minds of so many people, maybe even most people at this point, heck, it might have even been worth it. Again, we're talking about freeing ourselves, right, in the Manumission. So to me, it's important to break those centers of control. So whether it be power, whether it be information, whatever it is, I think the takedown of the mainstream media is a huge opportunity for us. And again, that's another reason why I decided to get back behind the mic. I want to be a part of that. So we'll see how that pans out. The other phenomenon that came out from this whole election was the rise of the alt-right. Ooh, the alt-right, the evil alt-right. Now, there's been so much, hoopla about the alt-right, and to be honest, I've kind of seen the alt-right from kind of my perspective, kind of bubbling just below the surface for a while, and it also didn't surprise me where it kind of came to its own with this election. Now, for those of you that don't know, the alt-right, and I think it was Richard Spencer that coined the term, and he's kind of very, very right-wing guy. Many of them are just not national socialists per se. They are very nationalist, and some of them are national socialists, and that's why many people equate them with Nazis and all these and neo-Nazis and all this kind of stuff. And they're pretty close. I'll tell you that much. They're pretty close to that. But they're mostly just ultra-right nationalist guys. And they kind of found their voice during the election because precisely all the things that I said. A lot of people, especially white people, males, straight people, found themselves being attacked by pop culture. Just the culture in general was saying, F you guys, you're terrible, you're all hateful, misogynist, bigots, racist, blah blah blah. So I think that was kind of the backlash. And again, it doesn't surprise me at all. When we talk about war, and we talk about the United States government attacking other countries, and then we get backlash. We, especially libertarians, that's never surprised us, right? We've always called it. I mean, look at Ron Paul. He's always called it from the very beginning. Don't be surprised if you get people trying to hit you back, right? If you walk around spitting in people's faces, or not even spitting, because that would actually be a physical, transgression, but just walking around calling people's moms a whore, let's say, right? And just walking around saying, hey, your mom's a whore, hey, your mom's a whore. That's, I don't know, you could say free speech. I'm technically not hurting anybody, whatever. But then if some dude decides to clock me in the nose, would that surprise anybody? No. Does it justify it? No, it also doesn't justify it. As a matter of fact, there was a cop standing right there, and he saw me call the guy's mom a whore, and he also saw the guy clock me in the nose. It would be the other guy, that hit me, that would go to jail, not me. And even though everybody that's standing around would essentially agree that, yeah, I'm the jerk, right? I'm the a-hole. He's walking around, he's calling everyone's mother a whore, he's being an a-hole. Everybody agrees 100%, including the cop, and the guy that goes to jail is the guy who who made the first move and who actually took it physical and attacked the other person. So we understand that. We don't say that those type of things are justified. But we also must think, hey, I'm not surprised. So when you have academia, when you have Hollywood, when you have the mainstream media, you have all these people just attack this group. Are you surprised when you have these type of backlashes from groups like the alt-right? Okay. So again, alt-right. But the other thing that I think is important to know about the alt-right is that they are a new form of the right in that it's not religious. Okay, so it's not about being Christian. It's not about being particularly either pious or being what we traditionally consider conservatives, right? We think of them, okay, so obviously one, religious. They're very much into, whether it's family values and all this kind of stuff. And the alt-right is not about that, that much. They're basically mostly about nationalism and about racial identity, or their ethnicity, right? And they basically say, hey, we don't care what you believe in. We don't care about this or that other thing. We just want to make sure that this country stays white, and that's it. That's basically our number one thing. And anything else comes second. And yeah, okay, it would probably be better if you were a good guy and good person, and if you stayed married and didn't have kids out of wedlock or slept around or whatever. But that's all secondary, even tertiary. To them, it's all about maintaining the demographics of the U.S. as as white. Okay. So that's the alt-right, and that's something that you're going to be hearing a lot more about because it's growing. What it will become, I don't know. There's already a lot of people that are disavowing them. I think they're pretty much like most super extremist groups. I think they're essentially just going to wither away and just be kind of just under the surface like they were before. It's actually the mainstream media that's been giving them the limelight, and because they just want to tie them to all Republicans and especially to Trump. So we'll see. The media is playing right into their hand as usual, just like they always play into Trump's hand. I mean, Trump, all he does is troll them, and they fall right into it. But we'll see. Let's see. What's another phenomenon? Oh, probably the biggest one I wanted to talk about. That's probably why I left it last. There was a huge, throughout the last year, I basically stopped recording, I believe, around February of this year. So it's been almost a full year that I've been off the air. And one of the things that I witnessed is just the fracture of libertarians. And what I mean by that is that this election was so, or the campaign even, was so divisive, and the candidates were so divisive that many libertarians went atavistic. So the ones that originally came from the left went right back to the left in many ways. A lot of people started, supporting even Bernie Sanders. Many of them were definitely never Trumpers. Obviously, many of them went for Gary Johnson. And then a lot of the libertarians that actually kind of came to libertarianism from the right just automatically, boom, for Donald Trump. Say, you know what, this guy's not establishment. He's completely different from everything else. Yeah, he's not perfect, but, never Hillary, essentially. And, we need to go with Daddy Trump. All right, well, that was huge. I mean, I just my head was spinning. I didn't even know what the heck was going on. Because if anything, hell, people, just hold your noses. If you're at least going to be, supporting one candidate or the other, at least do it with, holding your nose and saying, man, no, these guys are terrible. But you know what? Okay, this guy or this gal over the other. But man, it was just people that were just gung ho, just absolutely gung ho, all for the one candidate or the other. It was not so much for Hillary. I think it was more on the Trump side. But there were a lot during the actual primaries. There were a lot of libertarians that were all gung ho about Bernie, and again, that also surprised me quite a bit. So, again, with my brand of libertarianism as an anarcho-capitalist, a voluntarist, all of this stuff is just interesting to watch from a side. But to me, it's neither here nor there. But it was very interesting to watch, and that's still happening. So you still see a lot of people, even a lot of libertarians who are now don't even consider themselves libertarians anymore, and they actually are now saying, "No, I'm a conservative. I'm a right winger. I'm a Republican again." And so yeah, that's where we stand. So we're at a crucial point in history where a lot of battle lines are being drawn, but at the same time, if you now see after let's now talk about the aftermath. Now that Trump was elected, one of the most interesting things that I'm seeing now is some of the rhetoric from leftists. I mean, as libertarians, we've been talking about things like the right for states to do their own thing if they want to, whether it's secession, whether it's whatever it is, right? We've been talking about it for forever. And now you see leftists in California talking about Cal exit, and hey, they don't want to have anything to do with Trump or a country that would nominate him, much less elect him. We want to get the hell out and become our own country. Now leftists are talking this way. And we libertarians are like, where the hell have you been? Man, we've been wanting you to secede forever, we've been wanting to let other people chart their own course as they saw fit. We've been talking about this for a very long time, and now they're also talking about things like the equivalent of nullification. They're saying, well, whatever crazy policies Trump comes up with, we're not going to do them. Not our state, whether it's sanctuary cities or, blah, 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 whatever. And that's exactly what nullification is. We libertarians have been talking about it for a very long time. I mean, listen to Tom Woods, read his book, Nullification. Go to the 10th Amendment Center. These are concepts that libertarians have been talking about for a very long time. And the people have given us the most flack for it have been people on the left, right? They say, oh, you neo-Confederates, you guys are crazy, and I guess we're for slavery or bring back slavery or something. I don't know what they're trying to say with that. And you know what? Whatever the government tells you, that's what you're going to do. And then now, most recently, I see, I don't know if it was last week, but there was an article somewhere saying that, some people on the left were saying, we should have 62 million Americans refuse to pay taxes as basically as a middle finger to Trump, right? And stop the government so that the government can't do anything and implement any of Donald Trump's policies. And then there again, we libertarians, this is what we've been saying forever. Yeah, we shouldn't pay taxes. We should not feed the beast, starve the beast. And, people like, for my brand of libertarianism as voluntaries, we think, yeah, that goes for everybody. If you don't want your tax dollars going towards bombs to go kill people in other parts of the world, just like conservatives should not, that doesn't want their money going to support something like Planned Parenthood because they don't think abortion is right. It's the same thing. Everybody should be in the same playing field by not having their property, taken by force to do whatever, one group or another wants to do with it. And so, yeah, it's topsy-turvy, folks. It's craziness everywhere. It's very, very exciting, though. It's very interesting. I'm actually really excited to be alive in this time in history because I think we're at a tipping point. I don't know what's on the other side. I really hope that it's something that's positive and that it's a step in the right direction in the next societal evolution that I think humans are due for, but I'm not sure. So that's what I want the show to be. I want us to share these ideas, share what it is that we can do as individuals, what we can do as communities to kind of move that ball forward in a way that's actually increases our freedom, that increases our productivity, increases our ability to be better humans, to create a better society. So I hope you join me in this journey, and we'll see what we can do. We'll do our part, and we can only hope. But that's all I have for you guys tonight. And again, I'm sorry about the delay. And it's late over here where I am. I'm only going to be able to get a couple hours sleep before I have to get up and go to work. But hopefully be right on time next week on Sunday. And until then, please feel free to reach out to me, whether it's at themanumission.com, social media, Facebook, Twitter, etc. You can download the show on iTunes, on Stitcher, as well as on Google Play Music now. So we'll talk next week. If you want to know how you can help me keep the show going, or if you have a question, comment, or recommendation, you can contact me directly or through social media. Find out how to do all that by visiting manumission.com.